They laughed when she walked into the briefing room carrying a rifle case twice her size. They whispered when she didn't respond to their taunts, but when the impossible shot needed to be made, everyone held their breath and watched her finger on the trigger. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell us what city or country you're watching this from. Sierra Navarro had learned to speak through silence long before she ever held a military-grade weapon. Growing up in the barren stretch of Roswell, New Mexico, she was the daughter of a deaf mechanic and a librarian who communicated more through gestures than words. Her childhood was quiet, deliberate, and deeply intentional. While other kids shouted their way through playgrounds, Sierra observed. She noticed the way wind shifted dust, how shadows moved across canyon walls, how a rabbit's ears twitched seconds before it bolted. Her father taught her patience. Her mother taught her precision. Together they gave her a language the world didn't understand yet, the language of absolute focus. When Sierra turned 19, her mother died suddenly from an aneurysm. The silence in their home became unbearable. Her father retreated into his workshop, and Sierra found herself walking the desert alone for hours, trying to outrun grief. One afternoon, she stumbled upon an old shooting range outside town, abandoned and sun-bleached. There was a rusted sign that read, Navajo County Rifle Club, closed since '09. She climbed the fence. Inside, she found a forgotten .22 rifle leaning against a wooden bench, covered in dust but still intact. She had never fired a gun before, but something about the weight of it felt familiar, deliberate, purposeful. She spent the next 6 months teaching herself to shoot. Every evening after her shift at the diner, she'd return to that range. She didn't have a teacher, didn't have a manual. She had her father's patience and her mother's precision. She learned to control her breath, to feel her heartbeat between shots, to let the world fall away until there was only the target and the moment. She became obsessed not with hitting the bullseye, but with understanding why she missed when she did. Every failure was a lesson. Every silence before the shot was a prayer. By the time she turned 21, Sierra had made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She walked into the Army recruitment office in Albuquerque and told the recruiter she wanted to be a sniper. The man behind the desk, a heavy-set sergeant with a coffee-stained uniform, looked her up and down and laughed. "Sweetheart, you know what snipers do, right? It's not like the movies." Sierra didn't blink. She placed a crumpled piece of paper on his desk. It was a photo of a target she'd shot from 800 yards, every round within a 2-inch group. The sergeant stopped laughing. 3 weeks later, she was on a bus to Fort Benning, Georgia. Basic training was a nightmare she had expected. The shouting, the chaos, the constant demands. It was the opposite of everything she'd been raised to value. But Sierra adapted. While others complained, she observed. While others argued, she listened. The drill sergeants tried to break her silence, mistaking it for weakness. They screamed in her face, called her slow, called her soft. She never responded. She just kept moving, kept shooting, kept outperforming. By week 6, they stopped trying to break her. By week 10, they started watching her with something close to respect. After basic, Sierra applied for sniper school. The selection process was brutal. Out of 200 candidates, only 30 would make it through. She was one of 3 women in the group, and from day one, the skepticism was suffocating. The head instructor, a grizzled master sergeant named Kowalski, made it clear he didn't think women belonged in the program. "Sniping isn't about feelings," he barked during formation. "It's about cold calculation, patience, and the ability to take a life without hesitation. Most of you won't make it, and some of you shouldn't even be here." His eyes landed on Sierra and the 2 other women. The message was clear. The training was designed to crush the weak. Sleep deprivation, extreme weather exposure, psychological pressure, and impossible physical standards. They spent days in the Georgia swamps, motionless, covered in mud. They crawled through fields of broken glass. They held rifles steady for hours until their muscles screamed. Sierra thrived in the silence. While others cracked under the pressure, she found peace in it. Her childhood had prepared her for this. Patience wasn't a skill she had to learn. It was her native language. But Kowalski wasn't satisfied. He seemed personally offended by her presence. During live fire exercises, he'd position her in the worst conditions. Wind, rain, unstable ground. He'd give her less time than the others. He'd critique her form even when her shots were flawless. One afternoon, after she'd hit 15 consecutive targets at 1,000 yards, he walked up to her and said, "You got lucky." Sierra said nothing. She just reloaded and hit 15 more. The other candidates noticed. Some admired her resilience. Others resented it. A group of 5 men, led by a cocky Ranger candidate named Brock Henley, made it their mission to humiliate her. They sabotaged her gear, hid her ammunition, spread rumors that she was sleeping with instructors to get ahead. One night, they cornered her outside the barracks. Henley leaned in close, his breath reeking of chewing tobacco. "You don't belong here, Navarro. This isn't a place for girls playing dress-up. Do yourself a favor and quit before you get someone killed." Sierra looked him in the eye, her face expressionless, and walked past him without a word. The silence was louder than any comeback. Weeks passed. The class dwindled from 30 to 18, then 12, then 8. Sierra was still there. So was Henley. The final test was announced, a 72-hour field exercise in the Appalachian Mountains. Each candidate would be given a target package, a location, and a limited window to complete the shot. They'd have to navigate hostile terrain, evade mock enemy patrols, and execute the mission under extreme pressure. Failure meant disqualification. Success meant graduation. Sierra studied her packet in silence. Her target was a mannequin positioned on a ridge nearly 1,500 yards away, surrounded by dense forest and protected by simulated enemy sentries. The wind patterns in the mountains were unpredictable. The weather forecast called for rain and fog. It was, by design, nearly impossible. She moved out before dawn, carrying only her rifle, a small pack, and a canteen. The forest was dark and wet, the air thick with moisture. She moved like a ghost, her footsteps deliberate, her breathing controlled. She spent the first day observing the target area from a distance, noting the patrol patterns, the wind shifts, the way light filtered through the trees at different times. She didn't rush. Rushing was how people failed. On the second day, she found her position, a rocky outcrop concealed by thick brush, elevated enough to give her the angle she needed, but hidden enough to avoid detection. She settled in, her body becoming part of the landscape. Hours passed. Rain came and went. Her muscles ached, but she didn't move. She watched the wind, the way it bent the grass near the target. She calculated distance, drop, drift. She waited for the moment. Meanwhile, Henley and 2 others had reached their positions. Henley took his shot early, confident and aggressive. He missed. The instructors watching through scopes noted it immediately. He cursed, adjusted, and fired again. Another miss. Frustration set in. He fired 3 more times, each shot wider than the last. By the time he ran out of ammunition, he'd failed completely. The other 2 candidates fared no better. The conditions were too difficult. Back at base camp, Kowalski watched the monitors with grim satisfaction. "Told you," he muttered to another instructor. "This test separates the real snipers from the wannabes. None of them have what it takes." The other instructor glanced at the screen showing Sierra's position. "What about Navarro?" Kowalski snorted. "She's been sitting there for 30 hours. She's probably frozen up, choking." But Sierra wasn't choking. She was waiting. On the 3rd day, just before sunset, the wind shifted. The fog lifted slightly. The light hit the target at the exact angle she'd been anticipating. Her heartbeat slowed. Her breath became shallow. The world narrowed to a tunnel between her eye and the target. She felt her father's hands guiding her, her mother's voice reminding her to be patient. She squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed through the mountains. 1,500 yards away, the mannequin's head snapped back, a perfect center mass hit. The instructors erupted in disbelief. Kowalski stared at the monitor, his face pale. "That's impossible," he whispered. "No one makes that shot in these conditions." But Sierra had, and when she walked back into base camp 2 hours later, covered in mud, exhausted and silent as ever, every instructor stood. Kowalski approached her slowly, his expression unreadable. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, stiffly, reluctantly, He extended his hand. "You earned it, Navarro." Sierra shook his hand once, then walked past him to the barracks. She didn't need his validation. She'd never needed anyone's. Graduation came a week later. Out of 200 candidates, only 4 completed the program. Sierra Navarro was one of them. She stood on that stage in her dress uniform, the sniper tab gleaming on her shoulder, and felt her mother's presence beside her. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of purpose. Her first deployment came 6 months later. Iraq, a joint task force operation targeting high-value insurgent leaders. Sierra was assigned to a Marine recon unit operating in Fallujah. The team was skeptical at first, another Army sniper, and a woman at that. But her reputation preceded her. The unit leader, Captain Eddie Reyes, gave her a chance. "I don't care what you are," he told her bluntly. "I care if you can do the job. Prove it." She did. On her 3rd mission, the team was pinned down by enemy fire in a crumbling apartment complex. 2 Marines were wounded, trapped on the 2nd floor. The insurgents had them surrounded, and reinforcements were minutes away. The team was out of options. Reyes looked at Sierra. "Can you get eyes on them?" She nodded, already moving. She climbed to a rooftop 2 blocks away, set up her rifle, and scanned the chaos below. There, 3 shooters, positioned in windows, raining fire on her teammates. The distance was manageable, but the angles were brutal. She'd have to shoot through narrow gaps, accounting for wind, movement, and the fact that one missed shot could get her people killed. She took a breath, squeezed. The first shooter dropped. The second followed 3 seconds later. The third realized what was happening and ducked, but Sierra had already anticipated his movement. She adjusted, fired, and watched him fall. The Marines below scrambled to safety. The medevac arrived. Everyone lived. When they returned to base, Reyes found her cleaning her rifle in silence. He sat down beside her, shaking his head. "That was the most insane shooting I've ever seen." Sierra didn't look up. She just kept cleaning. Reyes smiled. "You don't talk much, do you?" She finally glanced at him, the faintest hint of a smirk on her lips. Actions speak louder. Over the next 2 years, Sierra became a legend in the Spec Ops community. Not because she was loud or flashy, but because she was reliable. When the impossible shot needed to be made, they called her. When the mission required absolute precision, they trusted her. She didn't give speeches or seek glory. She just did the work. But the silence came with a cost. She saw things that haunted her. She made shots that saved lives and ended others. She carried the weight of every decision, every trigger pull, every face she saw through her scope. Some nights, back on base, she'd sit alone in the dark and wonder if her mother would be proud or horrified. She'd think about her father, still in that workshop in Roswell, still speaking through silence. She'd wonder if all this violence had meaning, or if she was just another killer with good aim. Then one day, during a quiet moment between missions, a young Marine approached her. He was 19, fresh-faced, terrified. "Ma'am," he stammered, "I just wanted to say thank you. Last month in Ramadi you saved my team. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't made that shot." Sierra looked at him, really looked at him, and saw herself at 19, lost, grieving, searching for purpose. She nodded slowly. "Stay sharp out there." The kid smiled and walked away. And in that moment, Sierra understood. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of all the voices she'd saved. Years later, after multiple deployments and countless missions, Sierra returned home. She was offered promotions, medals, speaking engagements. She declined them all. Instead, she went back to Roswell, to that abandoned rifle range where it all began. She bought the property, rebuilt it, and opened a training facility for veterans struggling with PTSD. She taught them what her parents had taught her, that silence isn't weakness, it's strength. It's where you find yourself when the world gets too loud. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, she'd take her rifle to the range, set up a target at 1,500 yards, and take a single shot. Not to prove anything, not to remember the war, but to honor the silence that saved her life and the lives of so many others. They mocked her silence, they doubted her resolve. But when it mattered most, Sierra Navarro spoke the only language that mattered, the language of absolute precision, unwavering courage, and unbreakable will. If you believe that strength doesn't need words,